All right, I keep finding myself apologizing. I don't know if it's an apology, maybe a disclaimer, because I've had the pleasure of having so many good friends on the show lately as we rebooted Walking the Walk. And Dennis Snow is not only one of the most remarkable leaders you're ever going to meet, certainly one of the most remarkable leaders I've ever met, but we've had a friendship for a while. Dennis, I was trying to
Yeah.
look. It was we were working with the same publisher
Yeah.
years ago.
For
I
that
had to
was a
look up the
long
copy.
time ago.
Yeah, this says about 2010, 2009. I actually remember it because it was the year the Saints won the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
whichever year
Yeah.
that
So
was.
that sounds right. That sounds 2008, 2009 sounds about right
Somewhere
when
in
we
there.
first connected. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, we're
I
older than
know.
dirt.
Yeah. No, we both look exactly the same as we did back
Well,
then.
we are two good-looking men, that's for damn sure. There it is. Dennis is the author of Lessons from the Mouse. He's spoken all over the place, all over the world. He's just an amazing person. He has online programs that you need to investigate. I'd say his particular focus is in customer service
Right.
areas and whatnot and leadership, but he does many other things too. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about that. And most of all, he's one. We've been talking a lot about people who became leaders starting on the front lines and had opportunities at all levels. Well, Dennis's experience with Disney started when he was the pilot of a submarine, right?
Right, right. I drove. I can. My claim to fame is I drove a submarine that doesn't really go underwater. Not a lot of people have that on their resume. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well,
20,000
yeah.
leagues under the sea. Some people may
The
remember
important
that
thing, the
ride.
important thing is that it came back out of the water. That's the
That's right.
important thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
you
I started
started
on
you
the front
started your
lines.
right. Yeah, how did you work? Tell us a little bit about how you worked your way up
Well,
the chain of command there.
I started working at Disney in 1979 for a summer job. It was going to be a summer job. Turned into a 20-year career, which is a very common story there. Yeah, I was working at 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in Fantasyland. And then, Disney is very much a promotion from within company. Yeah, they look for, the first promotion is into a trainer position. So they look for people who are good at what they do from a technical side of things, but also had strong communication skills, and promote them into trainer. And then, from that position, looking for people who have technical skills, communication skills, leadership skills, and then they move them up into the first level of management, first official level of management, and so on. So it was a very traditional track for me in the company. But I discovered that what I really, and this is one of the things I loved about working at Disney, is there's so many things you can do. I discovered that I really loved the training side of things. That was really my passion. So they have a division called the Disney University, which is the internal training arm of the company. When people join the company, they go through the onboarding process. They have other training programs, management training programs, and got into that, and then managed that side of the business. And later on, through a series of moves, they spun off a division called the Disney Institute, where companies would come down and benchmark best practices with Disney. And I thought, oh, that sounds great. I would love to do that. And so I managed a division of that for several years. And that I just fell in love with, sharing some of the Disney best practices with other companies. And then decided, after I hit my 20-year mark, I said, that's a good round number. I was still relatively young, so if I totally screwed it up, I could go back. But I said, I'm going to go out on my own. And so that's when I developed the training and consulting and speaking business that I do now. And that's been a fantastic journey. And I, even through the challenges that we all know about, that every business has gone through, it was still one of the best decisions I ever made. I always tell my wife, the best decision I ever made was marrying you, Debbie. The second best decision I made was going out on my own for this business. And so, yeah, I have a great time. You know how it is. It's owning your own business has its pitfalls, but it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding.
It is, it's interesting. I think the reason that I hear a lot for people not going into business for themselves, although more and more are these days at some way, shape, or form. But one of the things that I keep hearing is that there's a risk involved, right? And
Yeah.
I remember going to a seminar for martial arts businesses years and years ago. And the guy had done his homework. He looked at all of us. He started asking, he said, how many members do you have? How many members do you have? And people would say different things. He said, so, okay. He said, how many people, when they got into this, you were afraid of failing? And of course, everybody raised their
Oh,
hand.
yeah.
And he said, here's the thing. He said, when you work for somebody else, how many people does it take to fire you? And somebody raised their hand. They said, one, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And then he said, well, I just asked you how many members you have at your center or your academies, right? And he said, it takes all of them to fire you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that was an interesting perspective.
That's
And
a
he asked,
very interesting
right?
perspective.
Yeah, he said, so does that make you feel a little bit better about the risk? I don't think anybody said yes, but
it does make you kind of,
it does.
One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got when I was in college, I
Mhm.
had a business professor. He said, whatever job you have, look at it as training for opening your own business.
Amen. Amen.
That even
Mhm.
if you don't do it, it makes
Yeah.
you look at what you do with an entrepreneurial mindset, and that's only going to help. But that stayed with me.
Yeah.
That really stayed
Yeah.
with me when he said that. And so, at the time I was driving submarines, at 20,000 leagues under the sea. But
That's still cool, by the way. But
it's long gone, but it really made me look at things in a different way.
yeah.
And I appreciate, that's one of those moments that's frozen in time. I think we all have those, like with the session
Yeah.
that you mentioned. There's moments when you look back in your career where you say, that was a good piece of advice or information. And that was one of them for me.
No, and I hope that goes all the way in for everybody because, I would consider you one of the leading experts in the world especially in the area
Thank you.
of customer
Yeah.
service. Well, it's not just me saying that, right? That a lot of people feel that way. But you had a frontline job where you experienced, you gained experience in customer service firsthand. That's a lot different than somebody taking a couple of courses at college. And I'm not demeaning that at all, but I'm just saying that if you have that experience and you take it with you, and I think that's the essential thing, isn't it? Don't forget where you came from. I mean, there's so many experiences, and even the smallest one can mean a lot later on.
I'm always appreciative of servers, front desk people in hotels. I'm always very appreciative of what they do because those jobs are hard. I always think everybody should be a server in a restaurant at some point in their lives because every moment is either making or breaking the experience for the guest. And they're hard jobs. And sometimes I think leaders forget that. And one of the things that Disney did, and again, Disney isn't perfect. They've never been perfect. Okay. They've never been perfect. But one of the things they did and still do that I think really is a great thing. They have, for lack of a better term, a program where during busy times of year, they call it cross utilization. Management goes out and works a frontline shift.
Right. Sam Walton
Whether
did the same thing. Yeah.
Scooping ice cream, sweeping streets, cleaning toilets. Basically, they would put us where we couldn't hurt anybody. They would, if you had an attractions background, they might send you back to that attraction. But what it did was it helped out during a busy time. All right. So there was a business value to that. But the real value for me was reminding you, these are hard jobs that people have to come in every day and do. And I think a lot of times as leaders, we forget how much we should appreciate the people that are really the face of the company.
Right.
They are the face. They're the brand. Those frontline people, they are the brand of the company. And I think
Well,
we
also,
got to remember that.
I know we're singing in harmony on this point, but I'd like to hear your take on it. Where, we preach around here, we preach leadership at all levels all the time.
Hmm.
I'm reminded of my favorite waiter in the whole world. It was a little Italian restaurant that I used to eat at in Portland, Maine. I actually used to eat at like I did regularly when I had enough money in those days, right? But anyway, this guy was in the European mold. He was a career waiter.
Yeah.
This is what this man wanted to do. This was his profession, and he took it
Yeah.
very seriously that way, right? And it was always just a wonderful experience. And he didn't treat us any differently than he treated the customers that were going to tip him huge amounts and whatnot. And to see that is amazing because, whether you like it or not, you're a leader.
Yeah.
If we define it properly, right? You inspire people.
Right.
You empower people around you. You guide the people around you. It doesn't matter what your rank, your title, or your job position is. And I think that's a good mindset too. And I think getting people that are in management positions, higher level management positions down on those front lines also helps them to appreciate that, right? Where are your leaders on the front lines and how are they doing it? They don't have all the power and authority you do, and yet they're still inspiring people. Like I said, they're empowering the people around them, usually informally, and guiding them. I think that's critical.
And you're absolutely right that Mark Sanborn wrote a book. It was leadership is not a title. I'm trying to remember but
I think Lao Tzu actually said that a couple thousand years ago, but we've been stealing from him ever since.
But it's a great book, but it's everybody should look at themselves. Going back to like that professor that I talked about, look at whatever role you have as training for owning your own business. And your story reminded me of one time I was getting ready to do a presentation at a hotel, and my shoes were a little scuffed, my dress shoes, and there was a shoe shine station in the lobby. And so I thought, I've got time, I'm going to get my shoe shine. Well, this guy was amazing. He, commented on the quality of the leather. He said, this is a nice pair of shoes. Here's some things you can do he could tell they were relatively new, but here's some things that you can do to keep them looking good all the time and lasting. And he just had this natural stream of discussion that was really engaging. It wasn't like, I don't want to talk. It was, pertinent information. And I thought, I'm going to basically double the cost of with my tip, because he was just so good. And my guess is that this gentleman makes a very good living because he sees himself as an ambassador of the organization, and it was funny. I mentioned him in my presentation. I said, I shared the story. And so later on in the day, there was a line waiting at his place. And so I got a kick out of that. But this was a guy who shines shoes for a living, but saw himself as an ambassador of goodwill,
I'm a little upset with you though, because when, you were giving me advice early on, when we met, I was still pretty early in this business, and you never told me I needed to check my shoes. I probably went out there with stuffed shoes.
Anything goes nowadays. Anything goes. Yeah. People, dressing up is a pair of jeans with only one hole in them, seems like now.
Yeah. Well, right now the jeans we have to buy are a couple $100 a pair, though.
Yeah, and they look like they look like they've been through the ringer.
I know. The more you spend, the worse they look, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah.
I'm old school. I still like to roll with the Duluth brand, and but I've stopped carrying that much. Yeah. No, you're right. So this, that idea, I like what you're saying there too. And isn't that touches on that idea, because it's sometimes when we're working with salespeople, this whole idea of you're a leader, whether you like it or not, is a tougher sell to them. And part of it is because they'll say, well, I don't have any direct reports. I'm out on my own. I'm a salesperson out on the road. I said, but no, you're doing the same things, aren't you? You're leading your customers, hopefully to a good
Yeah.
solution for them, right? Or a good fulfill their needs or their desires. And I said, you're doing the same thing. Again, you're inspiring them, you're empowering, you're guiding them. And you just hit that. Like this guy, when you were telling that story, I said, that was inspirational. To me, it's always inspirational when somebody cares about their craft enough and is willing to share. You'd think that's not important information, but it is. And not just to people like us, that sounded stupid, but we do have to be conscious of our appearance in front of audiences, right? It's a courtesy to them. That's the way I was taught, right?
Yeah.
And for someone to take what would seem like something that isn't all that important and really showing that they care about it and offering expertise in that area. I mean, your story inspired me.
And he was a professional.
Exactly.
That's probably the best word to use. And so whatever job you have, be a professional. Be the best at that job that you can be. And, the other point that's connected to what you're saying is new people are watching you, so, I remember when I joined Disney, I was surrounded by other cast members and their performance had an impact on me. And I think that's another thing to remember is that people joining the organization, they're watching, they're seeing how other people are performing and what they're doing. And so that leadership mentality comes into play there as well. What are people
seeing? Without a doubt.
You've heard the term everything speaks, right? Everything speaks. And so as an individual in the organization, everything speaks, from your attire, your appearance, to your behavior, to the tone of voice that you're using when you're talking to a customer, talking to a fellow employee. Other people are, newer people are picking up cues of, okay, what's this culture really like, beyond the new hire training program that I just went through. They're taking cues from everybody around them. So again, looking at it from that perspective, I think is important.
You brought up I'm scrambling to write some notes because you brought up some really interesting points. First of all, before we get too far off what you were talking about a few minutes ago, I remember Martin Luther King, one of my favorite quotes from him. You may be sweeping the street, but sweep the street as Picasso painted.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that's just a beautiful, beautiful quote. But the whole idea, I think you're touching on something I think it's critical. It's always been critical, more critical than ever right now, because I think it's safe to say that we have arguably probably the most caustic culture that we've had in a long time. Generally.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
And this idea, thank goodness for my mom, she wanted me to be a diplomat. I don't know if I've ever told you that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Dad wanted me to be a contractor. That didn't take. Mom wanted me to be a diplomat. And so I ended up running around in pajamas for 30 years getting beat up, right? but anyway, yeah. This idea of diplomacy, and for all the reasons you just mentioned, I think also very critically, the greatest inspiration we can offer another person is our example. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. And when you ask people what's most, because I always ask them, every workshop, every presentation, I ask people to think about the 10 people that inspired you the most. I usually ask them to go to the bottom of the list and read, but I'll tell you now, even the top positions, because it used to be they would put somebody famous, 1, 2, 3, and then down at 7, 8, 9, you'd start to get teacher or parent or a friend or a coworker. And now a lot of people are more conscious of putting those up higher, which is kind of cool.
That's interesting.
Right. Yeah. But this idea of diplomacy where you don't know how you're affecting the people around you, and you've got to deal with those folks, right? And too often these days, I guess the first reaction is either to say something snarky, not be careful about what you're saying. And I'm not saying you don't want to be inauthentic, but for instance, wearing your political views on your sleeve all the time at work, or any position like that, or social position that you can be right, doesn't mean that I'm wrong, right? And you don't know who you're going to. I hate to use the word offend, because I don't think we have a right not to be offended, but to be off-put, and especially when you're working closely with people. little diplomacy goes a long way, I
Yeah.
believe. You
Well,
think I'm way off base, or?
no, I think you're on target, and it's being receptive to differing ideas,
Right.
um,
Mhm.
and not taking everything as a personal affront.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Mhm.
and
What do you mean by
so
that?
yeah, that's right.
What are you trying to say?
Yeah, yeah. Let's step outside.
Are
Yeah,
you
put
saying are
on,
you saying I was taking this personally?
yeah. Um, but I
Right?
think
I mean, those are the kinds of arguments you hear.
yeah, and
Yeah.
when you get the diplomacy, um, it's a breath of fresh air right now
Mhm.
because we're so attached to social media, which is built on arguments.
Mhm.
It's built on taking a strong position one way or the other, and so we've become very used to this negativity
Yeah.
coming across. And when you're
Mhm.
out in the world and you come up to somebody who just is all about creating a positive experience. My wife Debbie and I had dinner last night out at Disney with a
Oh,
couple
what
friends.
a surprise.
I
I
know,
think you
yeah,
guys have the record for
yeah,
patronizing Disney.
yeah. And we
Uh,
had just a delightful server.
mhm,
And I
mhm.
can't pinpoint one thing that she did that made her delightful. It was a bunch of little things. Just
Mm.
the eye contact, the words that she used, the responsiveness, the recommendations, all of these just little touches. And it validated one of the points that I make in many of my presentations of little moments of wow add up. A
Mhm.
lot of times we're looking for how do we create this
Big bang kind of thing.
mind-boggling
Yeah.
experience, which is
Yeah.
great. I
Don't
mean,
need to.
and we should focus on those things. But the magic, the day-to-day magic comes from the little courtesies. And I think that's the point that I'm trying to make is that when somebody is delivering those little courtesies, it's it's like your shoulders go down. You
Oh,
just go,
I couldn't agree more. Not only could I not agree more, but I'd say those are the most important things. I remember one of the first responses when the pandemic hit. Some of my clients were calling and they wanted to know because I harp on this importance of inspiration so much, right? From a leadership position, I do believe it's one of three essential disciplines that a leader needs
Mhm.
to embrace. But having said that, it's the small things. Everyone was, like you said, looking for that big bang moment.
Yeah,
What's the email that I'm going to put out that's going to rally everybody? What little video can I put together? What
yeah,
presentation can I do? Well, one person called. She was amazing. She asked, and I got to a point because I didn't know, I don't know. Nobody knew what to do.
nobody
So I
knew what
started
to
asking,
do, right?
right? Yeah. So I started asking all these folks that were calling. I said, well, I'm going to ask you the same question. What are you doing right now? She said, well, not much. She said, I'm just calling everybody on my team. I said, how many people? I mean, when she said team, she meant everybody. Her organization wasn't huge, but it wasn't tiny. It was about 150 people. And she called every one of them. And I said, well, what are you saying to them? She said, how you doing?
Yeah,
Can I, what can I do to help you?
yeah,
Wow. And
yeah.
the performance in that company, and it was not an easy transition to the remote work for that particular organization, but they did it and they had a nice production spike. They were actually getting more work done for a while. And people were so grateful and so appreciative. That's what we mean by, right? You said these
That's
little moments
leadership.
of wow.
That's
Yeah,
really,
right.
and I'll bet you she got questions that she couldn't answer. And I
Well, it
think that,
started the conversation. It
yeah,
started the
right,
conversation,
starts the
and yeah.
conversation. But being
Mhm.
able to say, you know what, right now, I don't know. We're in
Yeah,
we're
and
in
she didn't,
uncharted
right,
territory. You know,
and she didn't dictate the needs that she thought she should,
yeah,
right? She heard from those. You're right. It started the conversation, and
yeah.
she got to hear firsthand what people were thinking about, and some of it was a surprise to her. But
And
that's
could
cool because then
influence
she was able to
decisions
respond.
and could
Hmm.
influence decisions on how to best take care of her people.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but I think sometimes as leaders, we think we need to know all the answers. There's no
Oh,
way.
oh,
There's no way
oh!
you can know all the
I
answers
want to make a
today.
T-shirt, Dennis. I want to make a
Yeah,
T-shirt say, "Leaders are not people. who have all the answers.
Yeah.
Now I could add a subtitle and say those, we call those people holes, right?
Yeah. That's
Then
right.
but I
That's
want
right.
on the back of
Yeah.
the t-shirt, I want leaders are the people who know how to ask the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know what I
take
mean?
action on the answers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's a great story. And it's a great example of people appreciate being appreciated. So as a leader, when you
Hmm.
think about, what can I, because employee engagement is such a hot term, and has been for
Yeah.
years now, employee engagement. But I always say, what does that mean? What does it really mean? And I think it
Mm.
means two things. I think it means truly engaging our people in how do we get better at what we do.
Hmm.
Not just it's not an exercise. It means truly engaging our people in how do we better serve our customers, because
Hmm.
our people know what frustrates our customers because they deal with it all the time.
Hmm.
So that's
Right.
number one. And number two, it means showing genuine, authentic appreciation
Hmm.
to our people. When
Yeah.
I think about, engaging our people, it's not a program. It's about let's get people involved and how do we get better at what we do. And let's really show true appreciation. And that example of making those multiple phone calls is a perfect example of that.
Hmm.
People would tell their families about things like that. Hey, I
Exactly.
got a call from my boss, just
Hmm.
checking in.
Hmm.
They talk about things like that.
Right. As opposed to the standard question that some were asking is, are you getting your work done?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right.
You need to log your
Yeah.
work because you're not
Yeah. Yeah.
on
Yeah. Yeah.
site. I need to know that your camera was on and that you're doing this and that. Yeah,
No, it's
when
tremendous.
it comes to those things. Yeah,
Yeah. No, again, you're hitting on, God, we sing in harmony. I can't think of a substantive point we've ever disagreed on.
yeah.
Um, but it's, and I'm not saying that in a stroking fashion.
Mhm.
Um, I believe that the things that you and I talk about, the things that we share with other folks are so fundamental that it would be hard to disagree with it.
Yeah,
I know we find people that do that, we grate people the wrong way sometimes because they don't want to come into this world or they don't recognize that human centric leadership is the only authentic leadership as far as
yeah,
I'm concerned,
yeah.
that nothing gets done without your people and your people are only going to perform at their best when they know you care about them. And you need
Absolutely,
right, and you need to show
absolutely.
that. Um,
Um,
but
and you have to constantly remind yourself about that, though. It's easy to
mhm,
forget. It's
yeah,
easy to lock yourself into the office, focus on the computer and the numbers that are popping
mhm.
up and not getting out there
Which is
on
the
the
management
floor.
side, which is
Yeah.
right, which is
Which you have
which
to do.
needs
I
to
mean,
be paid attention to. You
yeah,
right, yeah,
you've got to do it,
yeah,
but you've got to do the other side as well. If you
yeah,
neglect the other side, one of the things that I remember when I was, in management at Disney was we were held accountable for three things as leaders: the guest experience, the cast member or the employee experience, and financial results.
mhm.
That those were the three, and there was a balance on those. So
They're
as
all important,
they were
exactly.
all
Mhm,
important. And so you couldn't excel at one of those
mhm,
and move ahead.
yeah,
It was okay, it's the three-legged stool. And
mhm,
so you really had to, it forced isn't the right word, but it forced you to focus on three critical elements of leadership: the customer experience, the employee experience, and financial results. And for
mm,
people who weren't in a profit center, it was managing, financial results was managing costs, so
right, mhm,
everybody in leadership, there's a financial aspect to the job.
yeah,
And that really helped, when we made that shift to that three-legged stool of rounding out the qualities of what constituted a good leader. Of it wasn't just
yeah.
one thing.
No, no, it's not at all, and again, you opened up a couple of cans of worms there. Um, The first one being that the only and it's not really an argument. I guess I just want to reinforce this point that when people question which is more important, I always think about, I was blessed with so many great teachers in martial arts, and these things translated so nicely to, well, they were teaching real life. Martial arts was the vehicle. People need to understand that, the philosophy was much more important than the punching and kicking. Well, Dr. Yang Ming, who's to me, one of the greatest teachers I've ever encountered, he used to have us look at that Tai Chi symbol, the yin and the yang symbol.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And it means many things. And to keep the story short, it's a dynamic graphic, isn't it? And that was intentional. The folks that designed it actually came, I don't know if I ever told you this. It evolved out of pictures, the koi ponds in China, where one fish would move, the other one would take its place. They were so tightly packed. And the philosophers said, well, that's a pretty neat symbol for the way life really is, right? Constantly in motion, one thing moves, the other one takes its place. So if using your idea of that three-legged stool, at any given time, any of those areas can take on more importance.
Right.
But you always have to maintain a foothold in all of those other areas. And the only argument I say when someone says, what spins the wheel, though, in leadership, it's the human side. Nothing gets done without the human side. Now, that circles us back to another point you were making. I believe that a lot of times, and we're all guilty of it as people, not just as leaders, that it's our charge to show appreciation to people. That's our responsibility. We don't always get it back. And the argument that I make at any given time said, that's part of the conundrum of leadership, if you will.
Yeah.
I think there are things that need to be given unconditionally, or leaders need to give them first. Certainly respect, trust, and loyalty,
You're right.
which I think are the most important assets. But things like appreciation. And I hear it and I get it. And I've been in the same position, right? You're really working hard. You're doing as much as you can for your people. And you just feel like they don't appreciate everything you're doing. They want more. That's particularly acute in times of a crisis or a disaster. But we have to be resilient. We have to be tough to that now.
You've got to muscle through it, because it really does make a difference. It goes back to the old saying, people don't quit companies, they quit bosses, and which is, I think as leaders, we don't always know the impact our behavior is having. Tom Peters,
but it is.
Oh yeah. Tom Peters, you remember Tom Peters in Search of Excellence and all that? He had a great quote that I think I heard him say in a presentation. He said, the problem, and he would yell. He always yelled everything, but he would say, the problem isn't that your people don't know what you're doing. The problem is they do know what you're doing. And his point was, our people know what we really value by what we do. They're watching. They're watching. Are you truly walking the talk of the organization's mission and vision and values?
I was just going to say that's exactly why we picked this name for this program. If you're not walking the walk,
yeah. One of my favorite photos from my Disney days. This was well before my day. This was probably 1959 that this photo was taken. But it's a picture of Walt Disney in Disneyland. And he's picking up trash off the ground.
Yeah.
And the way I like to think now, I don't know if this actually would have happened or not, but the way I like to think about it is imagine a trainer and trainee, right near Walt when he was doing that. And the trainer saying, and it's important to keep the place clean, that we all pick up trash up, and you turn around and there's Walt picking up trash off again.
Right. Or even worse, what if he had turned to somebody else and said, hey, pick that up.
Right.
What a different, right. And I agree with you. And that idea of impact, it's so incredible. The lessons you take from different, like you said, everything that you do is going to be part of who you are, especially as an entrepreneur later on. And I think about something I used to share with my instructors in the martial arts center. I said, you choose your words carefully. And again, sensei is a leader by default. You cannot be a sensei without being a leader. And I said, your words will have so much impact on the people you're working with. You might think what you said is a throwaway. It doesn't mean that much, but to them, it might mean an awful lot, positive or negative. And I think especially, well, I shouldn't say especially with children, because I think for a leader, with employees. I hate that term, but the people you serve,
Yeah,
right? Your words and actions are magnified in their eyes. No,
absolutely. And we don't always realize that. Like you said,
no.
maybe a throwaway statement that, and I was guilty of that. I got
Oh, we
called
all
out.
are. We
I
all
got
are.
called
Yeah.
out by cast
Hmm.
members that I
Hmm.
made some throwaway statement, and 2 weeks
Hmm.
later, you know, Dennis, I just had to tell you, you made me really feel bad when you said
Yeah.
that, and I had
Yeah.
totally, to me, I totally,
It
and
wasn't your intention, and it
right, it
wasn't. Yeah.
wasn't my
Yeah. Yeah.
intention,
Mhm.
but that was the effect, and that's the important thing.
Yeah. No,
You
and we
know,
never know what that other person's experiencing on any given day, too. I'm not saying to be so careful that you don't have a sense of humor and
well, and we
you're
do
not.
have to address
Yeah.
challenges
Mhm.
too. I mean, we
Yeah.
do have to
Yeah.
address performance issues and those kinds of things.
Right.
But going
Right.
back to the word you used earlier, respect.
Hmm.
Another thing, one of my when I was getting ready to give my first reprimand to somebody at
Hmm.
Disney, my manager, the guy that I reported to, Bruce Fox, mentor, and this was
Hmm.
1981. This happened, and I remember like it was yesterday.
Mm.
He said, Dennis, as a leader, no matter what you have to do, even if you have to fire somebody,
Mm.
when they walk out of that door, you make sure they walk out with their dignity.
Yeah. Hmm.
And man, that was just one of those things that it's frozen in time
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Now, I still had to give the reprimand,
Hmm.
but it changed the way I thought about it to more of a constructive approach
Yeah.
of what can I do? What can I say that increases the likelihood that it was a attendance issue, that they're going to improve their attendance versus I'm going to tear this person down, you
No,
know?
but you're hitting on something that's so critical today. You mentioned engagement a while ago.
Mhm.
I get frustrated because the semantics keep changing. We're still facing the same issue. We always will. I mean, how involved people are in their work is always going to be an issue. There'll
Right.
be people that are more or less involved.
Sure.
We used to use the words engagement and disengagement. The hot ones now. Well, I guess these are even passe. Quiet quitting was a big one not too
Yeah.
long
Oh,
ago,
yeah. Yeah.
right? Quiet firing. I said, okay, you're putting a different name on the same pig, but
Uh-huh.
that's okay, here nor
Yeah.
there. But one of our strategies here is always tough yet compassionate.
Yeah.
And people they still challenge me on that. They say, why don't you put compassion first? I said, because too many people confuse compassion with kindness or weakness all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you do have to be cruel to be kind. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
mean it I mean it in the way I'm supporting what you said. Be
Right.
respectful. But
Yeah.
now when I heard that the quiet firing was a thing, so say, okay, now people are at their job, they're not working, and they're being quiet about it, just getting through. Nobody's talking to anybody. Now, even the managers, they're firing people without really talking about it, right?
Uh-huh.
Nobody's talking to one another. It's so difficult for people now to have those tough conversations,
Yeah.
but they can be done respectfully, and they can be. I always say it this way. Well, I'll use an example from teaching martial arts, and it just came to mind about working with the instructors. They caught me one time because they said, "You just told that kid he did something stupid." I said, "I know, I did." And the kid did do something. And I do the same thing with the incarcerated kids I work with now. I'll
Mm-hmm.
look at anybody and say, what you did, that was really stupid. But I
Mm-hmm.
said, watch this. I said, I will never look at that person and say, you're stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
there's a
That's a good
world of difference
distinction.
between,
Yeah. That's a good
yeah,
distinction. Um, yeah.
like you
Yeah.
said, sometimes you have to call them out, but, uh,
You can't neglect that part of the job.
mm-hmm,
Uh, but the way you do it, I guess
mm-hmm,
it really all goes back to intention, doesn't it? What's your intent
yeah,
behind what I'm about to
yeah,
do, or what I'm about to
right,
say?
right,
Um, and is it a constructive intent or a destructive intent?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and so
yeah,
you're accomplishing the same objective, but from a different perspective of what the intent behind it is.
yeah, and hopefully
Yeah,
incorporating the other person's perspective, right? If you're
yeah, yeah.
listening. But again, if you don't care, don't bother. But you just triggered something else too, in a good way, not in the socially demeaning way.
Did I trigger you, Jim? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did, but I love it.
Yeah.
I like being triggered, frankly. It stimulates my thinking, right? No, and I don't want to get lost on a tangent, but that's an important thing too. Sometimes people, when they're debating me, they think, geez, did I upset you? I said, no. I said, I'm getting passionate about it, right?
Yeah.
But no, I want to be challenged. I want my thinking stimulated. You might not change my mind. I don't know. We're
Right.
not at that stage yet. This is stage one. You
But
shook
let's
me
have
up.
a
That's good.
discussion. But let's have a
Yeah.
discussion. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was, when you were talking about impact, and I really do want to drive this point home. And I'm not approaching this from a political point of view. I'm approaching this clinically as someone who's supposed to know a thing or two about leadership. I think one of the things that Donald Trump did that was a disservice to his own cause was, and I saw it in his books long before he got to be president, in the language that he used. Very often he said something off the cuff, dismissively. And he didn't feel that it was making a real impact, but it did. And a lot of times it affected him negatively. Did you see the same thing with that? I mean, again, leaders have to realize they can't, we don't have the luxury of saying something off the cuff.
Right. And if we do sometimes, and I remember a leader out at Disney one time made an off the cuff remark walking into one of our facilities there. And there were a bunch of cast members around, and he made an off-the-cuff remark. And it really had a negative impact on the people who heard this. And he came, when he heard about it, he came back and called the meeting and said,
that's what I was going to ask you about. Yep.
I apologize. I didn't think about what I was saying. And I truly apologize. That's not the way I said it incorrectly, and it's my fault. I apologize. That's not
and if
the
you,
way
right,
I'm
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And if you're joking, make sure, damn sure people know you're joking. And if you can't tell a good joke, don't tell any jokes. Right. I know that's an old piece of speaker's advice, isn't it? Right.
Yeah. Open up with a joke. No.
Open up with a joke. Well, not if you suck at telling jokes.
Yeah. Not if you can't tell a joke. But that was again, there's moments frozen in time. And that was a moment frozen in time for me when he came back and apologized for a remark that he thought was just an innocent, observation.
But how inspiring is that?
Yeah.
Right. How inspiring is that he took the time? And again, we talk about, one of the interesting, we actually do get into debates about this one because people don't want to accept, and this isn't me saying this. I mean, the research is bomb-proof. One of the key actions or behaviors for a leader to engender trust is vulnerability. Yeah, and that's been explored in great detail lately, right?
Lately, yes, it really has.
Yeah. And I think that's what he did. I mean, he showed a vulnerability instead of walking away and thinking, well, this will pass, or I'm the boss anyway.
These folks are oversensitive. He recognized the problem and took responsibility. And he was, like you said, he was vulnerable. He got up in front of everybody that was there.
Yeah.
And I was wrong.
Hey, and you know what? Even if you're right most of the time, sometimes you got to pick your battles, and most of the time, I'm sorry doesn't cost you anything.
Right. Well, I've learned that with my wife. Most of us with a significant other.
No.
I know you've never had to apologize for anything.
Well, I'm just thinking, but Debbie's pretty much, a candidate for sainthood, so I can't imagine.
Yes, she is. So I'm usually the one that messes up. But we've learned in the 40 plus years of we were married in 1981. That being vulnerable and saying, I'm sorry. I screwed this up. I said something I shouldn't have said in the spur of the moment, whatever it may be. It brings, it's a relationship builder. It's a thing that builds a stronger bond. That vulnerability builds a stronger bond than I'm digging in, right or wrong. I'm digging in.
Mhm.
And another thing that I wanted to mention too, I think as leaders and in organizations, we do have a tendency to overcomplicate things.
Oh, yeah, amen. When our job should be the complete opposite, right?
Yeah, to simplify.
Mhm.
Everything things are so complicated now. When you're the person, the leader that can really simplify things
Mhm.
and remind people about the simple things. This is
Yeah.
what we are in business to do. This is who
Mhm.
we are. These are our values. When people start saying, okay, I see what we're all about. I like to say there are three things that customers want. When you think about an interaction that you have with a company, and I admit what I'm about to say is going to sound overly simplified, but I think when you think about it, it's true. We want you to be, let's say I'm your customer. We want you to be good at what you do, be knowledgeable, be good at what you do, be easy to do business with,
Hmm.
simplify my life, make it, eliminate the frustrations, be easy to do business with. And number three, be nice to me while you're doing it.
Mhm.
Make me feel valued, make me feel like you really care. You
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
whether it's a hardware store or a hospital or a real estate agent
Doesn't
or
matter.
any business.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
good at what you do, be
Mhm.
efficient in doing it, and be
Yeah.
nice to me, care about me.
Oh,
And so
geez.
I think
Yeah.
as leaders, if we can kind of bring our folks back to those are the things that create the great experiences that keep us employed. Um, and focus in on here's the things I want you to keep in mind, as
No,
you do what
no,
you do.
I couldn't agree with you more. And again, that's a wonderful lesson I learned from martial arts. People look at martial arts and they see all these complicated movements. I said, no, you know what those are made out of? Punches, kicks, and walking around.
Hmm.
You know, I said
Yeah.
those are the three things we need to be able to move. We need to be able to throw punches and kicks.
Yeah.
And that's not oversimplifying it. If you can't do those things well, none of those fancy moves mean a damn thing,
Right,
right?
right, right. They're
And
good
that,
for
right?
show, but yeah.
So that imprint, again, it's universal. And one of the things I say all the time is this, and I learned it from becoming a black belt. It's how I first started saying it, and now imprinted into leadership. Simple, not easy,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
These things are
Right.
simple. Doesn't make it's simple to get to
Doesn't make
black
it
belt.
easy.
You practice, and you're going to get there. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it easy? No, there's a lot of pain, a lot of introspection, a lot of suffering along the way, a lot of humility, a lot of good lessons, but
Yeah.
not easy.
That's a
Having
great
said that,
point.
right? Having said that, yeah, I believe, management, that's when you're dealing with the complexity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, that's important.
And
Leadership is simplifying all that and rallying people, transforming me into we so that we can go out and accomplish something together. No?
right, right. And create, great experiences for those we
Hmm.
serve. And,
Yeah. Well, there you go.
those are the companies that get through the challenging times when their customers, feel that experience, that value
Hmm.
is greater than the cost. And
Yeah.
that ultimately comes down to our people. They are the company. Our people are the company.
That's a great place. I was going to say, give you the last word. Those are pretty good last words right there.
Well, I'll give you one Walt Disney quote because I can't wrap up without a Walt Disney quote.
Well,
And it's
before you do that, then we're going to
okay.
say, because I want your bam at the end.
Uh,
Um, Dennis, it's been too long. Let's have you back on the program
oh, I'd love to.
early and,
Yeah, I
and
love our
often. Yeah.
chats. Yeah,
Oh yeah, it's so much fun. And I always learn. You stimulate my thinking. That's
and
what
vice
makes it all
versa.
worthwhile.
Yeah, vice versa.
And don't want to forget to mention Lessons from the Mouse.
Yeah.
Terrific book. If it's not on your shelf right now, then you need to get on Amazon. Or where would you like people to go? Is it Amazon okay? Or
Yeah,
you want
Amazon, and that's probably the best place to get the book.
and your website? Let's get your
Articles
website up
and
here.
other things. Yeah,
Mhm.
www.snowassociates.com, all one word. and
Have
everything
Dennis
kind of
come to your
lives
next
off that.
conference or your meeting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you'll be well served, and we'll have him back, and hopefully we'll be working together. So okay, yeah, let's wrap things up with the
Yeah,
with the Disney quote.
and it's probably his most famous quote. He said, "You can dream, design, create, and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make the dream a reality." And to me, that's everything we've been talking about in one quote. That it takes our people to bring all of this hard work, all of this capital, all of these things that we've created and built, but when it comes down to it, it comes down to our people interacting with our customers in whatever form that is. And so the better we are as leaders to facilitate that, the more successful the organization is going to be.
Then I'll just punctuate it with a quote from one of my favorite movies, The Last Samurai. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
That was Tom Cruise, right? Was that The Last Samurai?